Israel and Iran are two powerful countries in the Middle East. For many years they have been enemies. Their conflict was often a shadow war, meaning they fought each other indirectly. They supported opposing groups in other countries like Syria and Lebanon. They also engaged in cyber attacks and secret operations against each other. This long-standing tension is rooted in deep political and ideological differences. Israel sees Iran's nuclear ambitions and its regional influence as a direct threat to its existence. Iran, in turn, views Israel as an illegitimate state and a key ally of its main adversary, the United States. This history of hostility created a fragile situation where any direct confrontation could easily spiral out of control. The reasons for their tense relationship are complex and have developed over decades. After Iran's Islamic Revolution in 1979, the new government adopted a strong anti-Israel stance. Since then, the two nations have been locked in a bitter rivalry. Israel has long been concerned that Iran is trying to build nuclear weapons, a claim that Iran denies, stating its program is for peaceful energy purposes only. This nuclear issue has been the central point of contention. Israel has repeatedly stated it will do whatever is necessary to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear bomb, creating a constant threat of military action that has kept the entire region on high alert. In June 2025, this long-simmering shadow war finally exploded into direct, open conflict. The fragile standoff that had defined their relationship for so long was shattered. Instead of fighting through proxy forces or in secret, both nations began launching direct military attacks on each other's soil. This marked a terrifying new chapter in their rivalry. The shift from indirect to direct fighting was a significant escalation, one that international observers had feared for years. The world watched in alarm as the two regional powers abandoned all pretense and engaged in a full-scale military exchange, bringing the Middle East to the brink of a much larger and more devastating war. The move to direct attacks was triggered by a series of escalating events. Following an Iranian missile barrage against Israel in 2024, tensions remained dangerously high. Israel, feeling that its red lines had been crossed, decided that a more forceful response was required to restore its deterrence. This led to the planning and execution of a large-scale military operation against targets inside Iran. This decision transformed the nature of the conflict overnight. It was no longer a battle fought in the shadows or in neighboring countries. The fight was now directly between Israel and Iran, with missiles and jets flying across borders, bringing the consequences of war directly to their own people. The first wave of attacks was initiated by Israel under the code name Operation Rising Lion. It was a massive and coordinated air campaign. Over 200 Israeli fighter jets streaked across the sky, striking more than 100 different sites inside Iran. The primary targets were strategic and highly sensitive. Israeli warplanes targeted key parts of Iran's nuclear program, including facilities in Isfahan and Natanz. They also aimed for Iran's economic lifelines, hitting the world's largest gas field, South Pars, which caused a massive fire. An oil depot in the capital city of Tehran was also struck, sending plumes of black smoke into the air and disrupting vital energy supplies for the country. Iran's response was swift and forceful, codenamed the Hard Retaliation. In the hours and days that followed the Israeli strikes, Iran launched hundreds of ballistic missiles and explosive drones toward Israel. The targets were major Israeli cities including Jerusalem, Haifa, and Tel Aviv. Air raid sirens blared across the country, sending terrified citizens running for bomb shelters. Israel's advanced air defense systems, including the Iron Dome, worked to intercept the incoming projectiles, but some managed to get through the protective shield. The attacks were designed to sow fear and demonstrate that Iran could strike deep inside Israeli territory, proving that no part of the country was safe from retaliation. The human cost of this new wave of violence was immediate and tragic on both sides. In Iran, the initial Israeli strikes were devastating. Reports indicated that an Israeli missile struck a 14-story apartment building in Tehran, killing 60 people, including 29 children. In total, Iran reported that over 100 civilians were killed in the first 2 days of the campaign. In Israel, the Iranian missile barrages also caused civilian casualties. A missile slammed into an 8-story residential building south of Tel Aviv, and another hit a house in northern Israel. These attacks killed at least 9 people, including a 10-year-old boy, and left hundreds more injured, bringing the horror of the conflict directly to people's homes. The damage to infrastructure was extensive and will have long-lasting effects. In Iran, the strike on the South Pars gas field forced a partial suspension of production, hurting the country's economy. The attacks on oil facilities further strained its resources. In Israel, residential buildings were turned to rubble, and the constant threat of missile strikes disrupted daily life and the national economy. Both nations showed a willingness to hit not just military sites, but also targets that would impact the economy and the morale of the civilian population. This strategy of targeting civilian and economic centers demonstrated a dangerous new level of commitment to inflicting maximum damage on the enemy. The leaders of both Israel and Iran issued strong and defiant statements as the attacks unfolded. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed his nation, warning Iran that the initial strikes were just the beginning. He declared that the attacks Israel had seen were nothing compared to what was still to come if Iran did not cease its aggression. His defense minister, Israel Katz, delivered an even more direct threat, stating that Tehran will burn if the missile attacks on Israeli civilians continued. These messages were intended to project strength and resolve, signaling to both Iran and the world that Israel was prepared for a prolonged and punishing conflict. On the other side, Iran's leadership responded with equal fury and promises of vengeance. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei vowed a powerful and decisive response to what he called Israel's barbarous aggression. General Esmail Qusayri, a commander in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, raised the stakes even further by suggesting that Tehran was considering a closure of the Strait of Hormuz. This is a critical waterway for global oil shipments, and closing it would have a catastrophic impact on the world economy. Iran also warned that any country in the region that assisted Israel in its attacks would see its own military bases targeted in retaliation. The United States, a key ally of Israel, played a complicated and somewhat confusing role. The administration of President Donald Trump sent mixed signals. Initially, U.S. officials described the Israeli strikes as a unilateral action, and President Trump publicly said he didn't want them going in. However, he later changed his story, claiming full knowledge of the plan, and framing it as a consequence of a 60-day ultimatum he had given Iran to restart nuclear talks. He urged Iran to come to the table to make a deal before it's too late, using the military strikes as a form of high-stakes pressure to achieve his diplomatic goals. While the U.S. sent conflicting diplomatic messages, its military was actively involved in defending Israel. The American military used its Navy destroyers and missile defense systems stationed in the region to help intercept Iranian drones and missiles. In the weeks leading up to the conflict, the U.S. had also resupplied Israel's Iron Dome batteries and moved powerful B-52 and B-2 bombers to its base on Diego Garcia. This military support, combined with the evacuation of non-essential American personnel from the region just before the strikes, suggested a deeper level of coordination than the White House initially admitted, creating confusion about America's true position. The direct military conflict immediately destroyed any hope for diplomacy. A planned round of nuclear talks between the United States and Iran, which were scheduled to take place in Oman, was abruptly cancelled. Iran's foreign minister announced that discussions could not possibly proceed while Israel was carrying out its attacks on Iranian soil. This collapse of diplomacy was a major blow to international efforts to resolve the long-standing dispute over Iran's nuclear program. With the communication channels closed and the fighting intensifying, the path to a peaceful resolution seemed more distant than ever, leaving military action as the only form of dialogue between the nations. The economic fallout was felt almost instantly around the globe. Fear of a wider war in the Middle East, a region vital for global energy, caused panic in financial markets. The price of oil surged by 9% in a single day, as traders worried about major supply disruptions, especially with the threat of the Strait of Hormuz being closed. This spike in oil prices risks raising the cost of gasoline and other goods for people everywhere. At the same time, stock markets fell sharply. The Dow Jones Industrial Average in the United States dropped over 700 points, reflecting investor anxiety about the instability and its potential impact on the global economy. The risk of the conflict spreading is now the world's primary concern. The Middle East is a complex web of alliances and rivalries, and a direct war between Israel and Iran could easily pull in other countries. Iran has powerful allies and proxy groups, such as Hezbollah in Lebanon, which could open a new front against Israel. If Iran were to attack U.S. military bases in the region, it could draw America directly into the fighting, transforming a regional conflict into a global crisis. The situation is a tinderbox, and every new attack increases the chance of a miscalculation that could lead to a much larger and more destructive regional war. In summary, the escalation between Israel and Iran in June 2025 represents a grave danger to international peace and security. The conflict is rooted in decades of hostility, primarily centered on Iran's nuclear program and its regional ambitions, which Israel perceives as an existential threat. The direct attacks have caused significant death and destruction on both sides, shattered diplomatic efforts, and sent shockwaves through the global economy. For people around the world, this conflict matters because it threatens to disrupt the global oil supply, destabilize a critical region, and potentially draw in world powers, making the world a much more dangerous place for everyone.